I watched them all the time. I think I watched Indiana State and Iowa, Caitlin Clark play about the same last year, so I was watching a lot of basketball.
Like, can we get Caitlin Clark a little protection out there?
Anybody that does something flagrant to this young lady for what she's brought to the game should be suspended and fined big time.
What happens when one of the greatest basketball legends of all time watches the most talented young player in the WNBA get targeted by questionable tactics? You're about to find out, because Larry Bird's explosive comments about Marina Mabrey's actions against Caitlin Clark have absolutely shaken the basketball world to its core. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a superstar player get targeted the way Caitlin Clark has been in her career? Because what Larry Bird witnessed during that Connecticut Sun game changed everything about how he views what's happening in the WNBA. Now, here's what makes Bird's perspective absolutely devastating for Marina Mabrey. Larry Bird has been exactly where Caitlin Clark is right now. Back in the 1980s, Bird was the most skilled player in a league packed with incredible athletes who tried to intimidate him physically because they simply couldn't match his otherworldly basketball IQ. But here's the crucial difference that Bird pointed out, and this is where it gets really interesting for Mabrey's reputation. Bird knows the difference between championship-level competitive basketball and what he's seeing happen to Clark. And what he witnessed in that Mabrey incident, he called it the most cowardly act I've seen on a basketball court in decades. Yes, you heard that right.
Oh, and Marina Mabrey's going to get ejected. Marina Mabrey kind of blindsided Clark there. Oh, boy. Sheldon and Cunningham are getting into it. These two teams do not like each other.
When Bird watched the footage of Mabrey shoving Clark from behind while she was dealing with getting poked in the eye, his reaction was immediate and absolutely brutal. This is a man who battled against legendary enforcers like Bill Laimbeer and Dennis Rodman, who understood what genuine competitive fire looked like better than almost anyone in basketball history. Yet even he could see that what Mabrey did crossed every single line of sportsmanship and competitive integrity. But wait until you hear what Bird said about the timing of that shove. This is where his analysis becomes absolutely devastating for Mabrey. Before we continue, kindly like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now back to the story. The basketball legend pointed out something that many fans have been thinking, but nobody with his incredible credibility has dared to say out loud. There's a massive difference between playing championship-level defense and taking cheap shots at a player when they're completely vulnerable and not looking. Bird emphasized that in his era, widely considered the most physical period in NBA history, if you had a problem with someone, you faced them head-on like a warrior. You didn't wait until their back was turned to make your move like some kind of predator. And that's exactly what infuriated Bird the most about Mabrey's disgraceful approach. But here's where Bird's criticism becomes absolutely nuclear for Marina Mabrey's reputation. What particularly set the Celtics legend on fire was watching Mabrey's pathetic reaction after the incident. Instead of showing even the slightest bit of remorse or acknowledging that maybe she crossed a line, Mabrey acted like she was being unfairly criticized by the media and fans. She said, "Damned if I do, damned if I don't." But those words set Bird off even further. Bird noted that truly great competitors, the champions and legends of the game, always take full responsibility for their actions, especially when those actions potentially put another player at serious risk. He said watching Mabrey deflect criticism and play the victim reminded him of players who deep down knew they couldn't compete at the highest level, so they found other, more questionable ways to make an impact on the game. In other words, Bird essentially called Marina Mabrey a second-rate player who resorts to dirty tactics because she can't match superior talent through legitimate basketball skills. Now here's where Bird's analysis becomes absolutely fascinating and reveals something incredible about Caitlin Clark. Bird sees in Clark the exact same rare qualities that made him one of the greatest players ever to touch a basketball. That otherworldly basketball IQ, those clutch shooting abilities that defy logic, and most importantly, that supernatural vision to make everyone around her significantly better. But he also sees something that genuinely concerns him as someone who cares about the integrity of basketball. A phenomenally talented young player who's constantly having to watch for cheap shots and dirty tactics, instead of focusing purely on reaching her unlimited basketball potential. The way Bird describes it, Mabrey's approach represents absolutely everything that's wrong with how certain players are choosing to compete against Clark. Instead of pushing themselves to match her incredible skill level or outwork her on the court through dedication and preparation, there's this disturbing pattern of targeting her physically when she's most vulnerable. And Bird's description of this behavior? He called it the weakest form of basketball competition imaginable. But here's what really has the entire basketball world talking about Bird's explosive comments. Bird compared what Clark is facing to his own experiences dealing with physical intimidation throughout his career, but he was quick to point out something that puts Clark's situation in perfect perspective and makes her even more impressive. He said Clark is handling significantly more adversity at just 22 years old than most players face in their entire careers. And she's doing it while carrying the enormous weight of being the undisputed face of women's basketball. But what Bird said about Marina Mabrey's future in the league, that's the part that's absolutely exploding across social media right now, and you absolutely need to hear it to believe it. Bird suggested that if the WNBA continues to allow players like Mabrey to target superstars with impunity, it sends a message that mediocre players can use dirty tactics to stay relevant instead of improving their actual basketball skills. He said this creates a dangerous precedent that could drive away the very players who are elevating the league to new heights. Bird went even further, suggesting that the league's failure to adequately punish these actions sends the wrong message to young players watching at home. He said kids should be learning about skill, dedication, and sportsmanship from watching the WNBA, not about how to target opponents when they're vulnerable. But perhaps the most powerful part of Bird's entire commentary was his prediction about Clark's future despite these challenges. He said that Clark is forged by adversity, and that every cheap shot, every dirty play, every attempt to intimidate her only makes her mentally stronger and more determined to prove her superiority through pure basketball excellence. Bird compared Clark's situation to his own rookie year, when opposing players constantly tested him physically to see if he could handle the pressure. The difference, he noted, is that Clark is facing this treatment while also dealing with the unprecedented media attention and expectations that come with being the most marketable player in WNBA history. Here's what makes Bird's support of Clark so significant. He's not just defending a talented player, he's defending the integrity of basketball itself. He sees in Caitlin Elizabeth Clark everything that makes basketball beautiful: skill, vision, competitiveness, and class. And he sees in players like Mabrey everything that threatens to diminish the sport. The basketball legend made it clear that the WNBA is at a crossroads. They can either protect and showcase their brightest stars, allowing players like Clark to reach their full potential and elevate the entire league, or they can continue to allow lesser players to use dirty tactics to stay relevant. Bird's message was unmistakable. The league's future depends on making the right choice. But here's the question that has everyone talking. Will the WNBA listen to Larry Bird's warnings about protecting Caitlin Clark? Or will they continue to allow players like Marina Mabrey to tarnish the league's reputation with their questionable tactics? Now let's continue the conversation in the comments below. What do you think about Larry Bird's absolutely devastating takedown of Marina Mabrey's behavior? Are his criticisms completely justified, or do you think he's being too harsh? And more importantly, do you believe the WNBA will finally step up to protect their biggest star? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you want to see more analysis like this that cuts through the noise and tells you what's really happening in basketball, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The basketball world is watching how this story develops, and Larry Bird's explosive words might just be the catalyst that finally changes how Caitlin Clark gets treated in the WNBA. Don't miss what happens next. This story is far from over. Thanks for watching.